Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Here's what that actually means. Somewhere between your teenage years and your 30s, you were supposed to go through something that broke you open, a ritual that marked the end of who you were as a boy and forced you to become something harder, cleaner, more real. Almost no man in the modern West ever gets that. And the research suggests we're paying for it every single day. By the end of this video, you'll understand 5 specific ancient rituals, from indigenous vision quests to Spartan cryptia to Stoic death meditation, that modern psychology has confirmed are not superstition. They're technology. Psychological technology that rewires identity, builds genuine resilience, and creates the kind of clarity most men spend decades chasing. This isn't philosophy for its own sake. If you're in your 20s and feel directionless, your 30s and feel trapped, your 40s and feel like you missed something, this is the mechanism. The ancient world gave boys a moment that cracked their old identity and forged a new one. We took that away and replaced it with nothing. The result is 40-year-old men who still haven't decided what they actually stand for. Ritual isolation, the forced solitude of the vision quest, is neurologically proven to accelerate identity formation. The Lakota Sioux Hanbokiapi, or crying for a vision, sent young men alone onto a hill for up to 4 days, no food, no company, nothing but sky and silence. Marcus Aurelius did his own version of this. He wrote in Meditations that the man who retreats into himself needs nothing external to be at peace. Not mysticism, he was describing a practice he ran deliberately. Modern CEOs call it a personal retreat. The Lakota called it becoming a man. Psychologist Ari Kryblansky's work on cognitive closure shows that removing external input forces the brain to consolidate identity. When there's no social feedback, no role to perform, the ego has to reckon with what's actually there underneath. This is why solitary confinement is torture in excess, but strategic solitude is transformation. The brain, without distraction, is forced to integrate. That integration is what the Lakota called receiving a vision. Modern psychology calls it self-concept clarity. Symbolic death and rebirth, the core of almost every initiation ritual, maps directly onto what psychologists call identity discontinuity, and it's the only proven way to make deep behavioral change stick. In ancient Egypt, initiates into the mystery schools were sealed in sarcophagi overnight. In the Xhosa tradition of South Africa, the same culture that produced Nelson Mandela, young men undergo akwaluka, circumcision, isolation, and a ritual burning of their boyhood possessions. Mandela wrote in Long Walk to Freedom that he was not the same man who walked in. He meant it literally. The old self had a name and a role. The new man was given different ones. Dan McAdams at Northwestern has spent 30 years studying how humans build identity narratives. His finding, meaningful change requires what he calls a contamination sequence, a story where your old self is explicitly ended, not just amended. Without a clear break, the old identity reasserts itself under stress. This is why people relapse, why they return to bad relationships, why resolutions fail in February. The ancient world understood this intuitively. You cannot become new while still being the old thing. You need a death. Even a symbolic one. Voluntary physical ordeal, not random suffering, but chosen, witnessed pain, triggers the exact neurological signature associated with post-traumatic growth. The Satirma tribe in the Amazon have initiates wear gloves filled with bullet ants, among the most painful stings on earth, for 10 minutes. They repeat it over years. The Spartans submitted their young men to the cryptia, a year of living alone in the wilderness, surviving on nothing, with execution as the penalty for failure. Nietzsche's "What does not kill me makes me stronger" wasn't an aphorism, it was an observation about what actually happens in the nervous system when a man voluntarily goes to his edge and survives. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun coined post-traumatic growth in the 1990s. The key word is voluntary. Research shows that when suffering is chosen and framed within a larger meaning structure, as ritual ordeal always is, it produces measurable increases in personal strength, sense of possibility, and depth of connection to others. The pain has to mean something. The bullet ant glove means something because the whole tribe watches, because there is a before and an after, because you chose it. Random suffering is trauma. Chosen, witnessed suffering inside a container of meaning is initiation. The transmission of knowledge from an elder, a specific, named mentor who has lived what he is teaching, is not tradition for tradition's sake. It's the only learning mode that transfers integrated wisdom rather than raw information. The Stoics understood this completely. Epictetus didn't write books, he talked to men, in person, and his student Arrian recorded what he said. The relationship was the curriculum. Socrates didn't have a school, he had walks. Every warrior tradition from the Japanese samurai sensei structure to the medieval guild system required face-to-face apprenticeship. Not because books didn't exist, in many of these cultures they did, but because they knew something that neuroscience is only now catching up to. Mirror neurons, identified by Giacomo Rizzolatti, fire identically whether you perform an action or watch someone skilled perform it. This is how embodied knowledge transfers, not through instruction but through proximity, observation, and guided repetition. When Epictetus told a student, "Show me that you have suffered and benefited from that suffering," he wasn't being cruel. He was activating a learning channel that reading Epictetus 23 centuries later simply cannot replicate. The mentor's presence is part of the mechanism. The ancient world didn't have a word for mentorship because they didn't need one, it was just how knowledge moved between men. Public declaration of identity, the naming ceremony, the new role announced to the community, creates accountability structures that make the new self survivable under pressure. In Zulu tradition, after initiation, a young man returns to his village with a new name that encodes his new status, his old name is never spoken again. In ancient Rome, a boy's coming of age was the toga virilis, a public ceremony witnessed by the entire community. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz by finding meaning in his suffering, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that what allows a man to survive extremity is not willpower but a story about who he is that's bigger than the present moment. The community witnessing the declaration makes that story real in a way private resolution never can. This is identity foreclosure in the Ericksonian sense, but intentional rather than accidental. Research by Defna Oyserman at USC shows that when people publicly commit to a future self in a witnessed social context, the neurological cost of betraying that self increases measurably. It's not social pressure in the weak sense, it's identity architecture. The community becomes the external structure that holds the new self in place while the internal structure is still forming. Every man knows this intuitively. You are slightly different in front of people who believe in the man you said you'd be. The ritual uses that mechanism deliberately. Here's what we covered. 1. Strategic solitude forces identity consolidation. The vision quest is neuroscience, not mysticism. 2. You cannot become genuinely new without a symbolic death of the old self. Identity discontinuity is the mechanism behind real change. 3. Voluntary, witnessed, meaningful ordeal produces growth that random suffering never does. 4. Embodied wisdom only transfers in the presence of someone who has lived it, the mentor is not optional. 5. Public declaration in front of your community creates the external architecture that makes your new identity survivable. These aren't ancient superstitions. They are, as Joseph Campbell spent his life arguing, the operating system humanity ran on for 50,000 years. We deleted it in 3 generations and acted surprised when men stopped knowing who they are. If this landed for you, and I think it did, or you wouldn't still be here, subscribe. We drop one of these every Tuesday and Friday. No filler, no motivation porn, just the ideas that the ancient world and modern science agree on, and what they actually mean for the way you live.